Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Here I am on Wimpole Street in London, and behind me you can see the house where the first Earl of Cromer lived. That's not where he died. We're feeling he died in Dorset, where he's buried near there. So Lord Cromer, he's best known for having been Consul General of Egypt from 1883 till I can't remember when, a few years later, but it was involved in Egypt for some time before and after that. Anyhow, he was born in this country. I'm just trying to think of the year, 1841, if I got that right. Anyway, so his family had moved from Germany over a century earlier. Johann Bering had come here. The Berings eventually set up Berings Bank, which prospered, which was a very major bank until it crashed in about 1996. Nick Leeson in Singapore managed to wreck it. The boy who lost $1 billion. There was some talk about should the government come in and rescue it. The Prime Minister at the time, John Major, said no, we'll just let it fall. And actually the contagion didn't spread more through the British banking sector. But back to our man. So I don't know anything about his schooling. He didn't go to a famous school so far as I'm aware, but he entered Sandhurst at an early age, the Royal Military Academy, and he passed out as a military officer. So he served in various sectors, where he was commended for his performance. He was then posted to Corfu, that Greek island, but the Ionian Islands, Corfu and a few of them around it, were British rule for some time until the 1860s. So he took a lover there. He had a child by her. So I don't know. I don't think he brought up his daughter from that marriage. He subsequently married and had children. That's why there's an Earl Cromer to this day, or an Earl of Cromer. Cromer's a town in Norfolk, just a little bit in from the coast. So he must have owned land up there. That's where they tend to take their title from. So his title doesn't come from his surname. His surname is Bering. Anyway. Then he was sent to Egypt. He hadn't been to university, felt that he wasn't bookish enough, so he did made a big effort to swat up. He mastered Italian, he learnt Turkish, obviously learnt quite a bit of Latin and Greek at school. And then he was sent to Egypt in 1879. So because the Suez Canal was being built, Egypt was very important for the United Kingdom because it was the arterial route to Asia. So the United Kingdom didn't really need the whole of Egypt, just needed the canal. Anyway, Egypt was nominally part of the Ottoman Empire, but they had been effectively independent for a couple of centuries. The Mamelukes had ruled it, then Muhammad Ali, an Albanian adventurer, had set himself up as Khedive there after the Napoleonic Wars, and the British Army was there on and off, and the French had a role there, and various ministries were superintended by the French and the British. Egypt got hugely in debt over the various things, and then the Khedive had sold all his shares in the Suez Canal to the United Kingdom. So Disraeli got the Rothschilds to lend the UK government the money to purchase them. So that was that. But then there was Urabi, who was an Egyptian army officer who led a revolt, pushed out the Khedive. But anyway, the British army bombarded Alexandria, landed, won the Battle of Tel el-Kebir through a night march. Urabi was arrested, and he was wisely not executed, and he was exiled to the Seychelles, where he lived out his days. Now, much of the upper class was Turkish ancestry and spoke Turkish more than Egyptian. So, after the Mahdist revolt, the British began to be more involved and the French less so. So he was Consul General, and he held sway over a number of Egyptian ministries. The Department of the Antiquities was set up. And so Howard Carter, who did so much archaeology there, he was a protege of his. Lord Cromer, he never learnt Arabic because he didn't see the need. When he wished to speak to upper-class Egyptians, he spoke to them in Turkish usually. A few of them learnt French or even English back then. So he was a man of many parts, a Renaissance man, a soldier, but a man of some contradictions. Like he thought a little learning was a dangerous thing, and discouraged too much higher education for Egyptians, and didn't think that women should be in the medical profession, for instance. But he also sought the advancement of women. You think, aren't these two contradictory goals? So then he thought that the veil was terrible, was holding women back, wanted the advancement of women, but he didn't want women, including in the United Kingdom, to be allowed to vote, and is part of this men's league for opposing women's suffrage. So he was raised to the peerage as Earl of Cromer for meritorious service in Egypt, but I think many Egyptians would say he was not so meritorious. Then the First World War broke out, and the Khedive at the time declared for the Ottomans. The Ottomans appeared to inspire no loyalty. The Ottoman army hadn't been there for a century, so that Khedive or King Abbas was pushed aside, and a number of members of his then became king. So the United Kingdom simply declared that Egypt had been annexed. As far as I know, no Egyptians actually objected to that. Certainly none rebelled. After that, in the early 1920s, there was a big headache for the UK when Egyptians wanted independence, and there was a WAFD party, as in the delegation, going to London saying, all right, First World is over now, will you please leave? But anyway, he was dead by that time. He retired to the UK. He died in 1917. He'd been chairing the Dardanelles Commission in 1916, as in for the Dardanelles campaign, for the Allied campaign at Gallipoli, the defeat. What went wrong? How could this be avoided again? Apportioning blame and so forth. But that put a strain on his health. He was 75 by that stage. So he's buried down there near Bournemouth. Anything else about him? So he had a lot of the racial prejudices of his era, and assumed that Western civilization was just innately better. Although oddly, he didn't seem to think this was something for Asians and Africans to aspire to. He didn't want to Westernize them. And took a rather dim view of Islam, though he was tactful enough not to say that to the many Muslims he was governing over. But he wasn't a great manager, seemed to lack emotional intelligence, come across as unnecessarily rude a lot of the time. So that is Lord Cromer. Toodaloo.